Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the series on YouTube that we like to call Music Meltdown. This is where we take the discography or tracks by your favorite artists and we go ahead and attempt to rank them and sort of rate them based upon our own personal preferences. I say our, but as you may see currently, it is just myself, Adrienne, and yeah, this was meant to be done initially with Aiden and Steph. Steph decided to step away from the channel, and Aiden as well has some things going on in his personal life that is going to make him take a break as well, if not permanently. Regardless, I can't just step away fully. I started this, and it's up to me to continue to make what I feel is the best form of content that I can. That being said, we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorites, the band. Initially Dylan's backing band, but eventually becoming their own thing. At the front, you have people such as Levon Helm, Richard Emmanuel, Robbie Robertson, and many others in the band. They ended up releasing, I want to say, 10 studio records. However, one of them is a covers album called Moondog Matinee, which I do not care about. So I will not be rating it because who cares about the cover records? That being said, I'm a pretty big fan of this group. I think that they are one of the greatest of their time. And ultimately, they get a ton of credit, but I don't think that they really get acknowledged for how great of an overall and how I don't think that they get acknowledged for how consistent their discography is, even upon their reunion. With that being said, I have 9 studio records that I'm going to be counting, and I'm going to begin that now. At my number 9, I'm going to be going with the record Jericho. This one comes very long after Islands, and it doesn't have many of the band's key members at this point. And this record became filled with a bunch of session musicians, and it kind of showcased that this record was a little bit doomed to fail. The only thing that this record really succeeds at is making it difficult to write about. It's basically just a milquetoast version of what the band were. I do like Too Soon Gone, but I really hated their take on Atlantic City. Bruce Springsteen just creates the most perfect version of that song, and the band absolutely pounce on what is a tremendous track. Past that, there just aren't really any memorable moments, for better or worse, or interesting concepts to be found on it. It's perfectly boring and generally speaking, just sort of okay. It's a pretty low 2.5 stars for me. I'm not much a fan of this record, but I'm going to be jumping up pretty quickly to 3 stars here. With the next record, I'm going to be discussing the follow up, High on the Hog. Let's get it out of the way. Firstly, the album art is just terrible. It is really disgusting, and I would not recommend staring at it for a prolonged period of time because it is repulsive. And I went in knowing that this record has a pretty poor reputation, and I was pleasantly surprised. It starts out very strong with the track Stand Up, which sounds like an updated version of what they were doing on Islands for the 90s. And I was surprised with the general production of this record. I ended up really enjoying the sound way more than Jericho, which to me felt very boring and a little lifeless. Where I Should Always Be is very good. Then from Free Your Mind to Crazy Mama are a bunch of solid songs, but none of them are really great. They're good though. I Must Love You Too and I Must Love You Too Much is also very good, but not long after there you get Ramble Jungle, which is probably their second worst song. Just really awful stuff. But it ends pretty strong with Chain Gang. She was very reminiscent of a softer style of 80s ballad to me. It makes zero sense for the record, but it's nice. It's good. I like it, so I don't care. Overall, it's a pretty decent record, and it's better than I think anybody could have expected it to be, given how far away they were removed from the classic run. But overall, it's still not good, I would say. And because of how bad I think Ramble Jungle is, I'm going to have it at 3 stars. Although I could see it potentially going to 3.5 if that song were removed, because there is enough generally good material on this record. I'm going to be finishing out the reunion stuff very quickly, as my next record I'm going to be discussing is Jubilation, and it's a solid record. It's their most rootsy or country of any of the reunion records, and because of that, I think a lot of the arrangements and a lot of the songs as well are very good. Vocally, they're starting to wane a bit, however, but there's not a ton to say about any of the songs past the standouts. None of them really stick out very much. My favorites were Book Faded Brown, Don't Wait, Last Train to Memphis, Bound by Love, and If I Should Fail. The rest of the songs were generally speaking just sort of solid or fine. Overall, though, I would say that I generally enjoyed my experience with this record, and I'd give it a light 3.5 stars. I think it's a good album generally. That being said, we're into the classic album run of what they did. I think all of these are very good to great records. They all showcase what this band is truly talented of. It showcases the true talents of this band and just how great they really were as a unit. My least favorite of those were the last one, being Islands, and it was a bit of a step down from Northern Lights Southern Cross, but not by too much. They're dropping a little bit of the rootsier stuff that was on most of their previous records, opting for something a little bit more soft rock, which works very well with their writing and vocals, so I have no issues with it. Despite that, there are some killer guitar moments found on this album. Track wise, I'd say it's more consistent than some of the other records, but I think all of their albums are very consistent, so it's not too much of a bit of praise there. With songs like Streetwalker, Let the Night Fall, Ain't That a Lot of Love, and the Saga of Patoot Rogue. However, some of the songs on this record are a little weak. The title track didn't do a ton, and Christmas Must Be Tonight weren't great. But my favorite cuts, being Georgia on My Mind and Knockin' Last John, make up for that very easily. It's a very good album by the band, and I really do want to be able to push it to 4.5 to say that all of these are great or higher. But there are notably weaker elements to this one, which do bump it down to a 4-star record. Although I wouldn't blame anybody for calling this one great either. The next record I'm going to be talking about is Cahoots. And whenever I first started listening for this project, the only ones that I knew actually were Cahoots and the band Self-Titled. And I wasn't very high on Cahoots on my first go around, but this record was a bit of a revelation because I think that it is just fantastic. To start, like all of the records in this run, I think that it just sounds amazing. I love the production on this record. They're so crisp and allow everything to sort of build and showcase how amazing they are. My favorite part here and through a lot of the discography is the keys. They are just amazing, and they're really what allow the group to be able to work together in this harmonious way that they always do. One of my favorite songs on this record would be Life in a Carnival, When I Paint My Masterpiece, The Moonstruck One, Think It Out Loud, and Smoke Signal. But like all of my favorite band records up here, there's generally speaking one song that I'm not as into compared to the other ones, this one being Volcano, but pretty much every other song here is just exceptional. And it hits a very solid sweet spot in my music listening. It's nothing too hard or complex, but it's nothing that I wouldn't want to go to other classic rock or anything. It hits a certain balance of like this sort of soul country, sort of folky nature, and this just amazing classic rock tendencies that I think blends them into such a unique style and really showcases why they were able to excel so much. This one's going to be 4.5 stars for me. I think it's just great. This is probably going to be my biggest controversy in this list. I know all of my lists have to have some type of controversy to them, but I don't know. It is what it is. Next up, I'm going to be talking about the band Self-Titled. And I'm just going to come out and say it was going to be brutal for any band to have to follow up a record as good as music from Big Pink. But the band settled down, let their sort of country roots flow into them, and delivered another excellent record. It's a more consistent batch of songs overall, with all of them being very good and absolutely beautifully executed. However, I think that they lose a little bit of the soul that could be found on Big Pink, which does take a little bit away from me. Despite that, the writing and performances here are just up to par. Cuts like Across the Great Divide, Rag Mama Rag, When You Awake, Up on Cripple Creek, and Look Out Cleveland are probably my favorites. But to pick favorites is doing a disservice to all of just the amazing songs on this record. I can't say much bad about it overall, except that I just don't love it like I love other band records. A pretty solid 4.5 stars as well. I think that this one is also pretty great. Next record I'm going to be talking about is, interestingly enough, the Northern Lights Southern Cross. This was a record that I wasn't as into on my first listen through. It took on my re-listen to really showcase just how, I've already said this multiple times, but just how brilliant this album is and how talented just the band are in general. This is kind of where you can tell they maybe were starting to retread a bit of ground that they did on the previous records, but who cares? I mean, the performances and the songwriting is going to be enough that even if they're retreading a bit of what they were previously doing, I would be able to sort of let that go and just state how much I love it with that. Compared to the first four records, the sound on this one starts to come across a bit more generic to them. However, as I kept listening, it all just became more and more pointless. The songs here are just amazing. I love the opener Forbidden Fruit. Hobo Jungle isn't that much weaker, and Ophelia is just utterly superb. One of their best songs. Acadian Driftwood and Ring Your Bell are just superb as well. And it makes no difference. It's a stunning rootsy ballad. I love the subtle synth touches that are on Jupiter Hollows. It's super unique and works out brilliantly. I do feel that Rag and Bones is a slight step down from those, but like I said on Cahoots, most of their records have that sort of song that I'm not as into. But despite that, I still really loved this record. It's another 4.5 stars and a pretty damn strong 4.5 stars for what it's worth. At my number 2 slot, I'm going to be talking about the record Stage Fright. It's important to note that this was the record that they did with amazing producer Todd Rundgren, well known for stuff such as Meat Loaf's Bad Out of Hell, the New York Dolls self-titled record, We're an American Band by Grand Funk Railroad, and many, many others. And he helps after the self-titled to make this record feel a lot tighter and a lot more cohesive, I would say, while retaining a similar sound to that. It's less rootsy and maybe more leaning on the sort of classic rock mentality, so they didn't showcase as much. I prefer the overall sound and instrumentation of this record in comparison, and it has some of their absolute best songs: Sleeping, Time to Kill, and Just Another Whisper Spot, where the solo has them being flashy for once, and I just love it. There's not a lot of glitz, not a lot of glamour in this catalog, but whenever they do showcase themselves and just how amazing of players they are, it's always just utterly spectacular. As well, The Shape I'm In and the amazing title track are great tracks as well. The only weaker moment on this album is the W.S. Wallach's Medicine Shop, but it's still better than most worst bands' best songs. Yeah, to keep retreading what I've been saying, it's just an amazing album. It's really fantastic. It's a strong 4.5 stars, but the number one record by the band is pretty self-explanatory. It is their debut record, Music from Big Pink. And I'm going to cut to the chase. This is my favorite record of the entirety of the 60s. I think that this record is utterly and entirely brilliant on every level. It is an easy 5 stars, and it's probably somewhere within my top 20 all time. I love the vocals across this record. If I could point out just one instrument, I think that the organ is spectacular. And anytime that it's showcased or prevalent within a song, it's just able to elevate it tenfold. Songwriting wise, it's just amazing. You could tell that they were working with Bob Dylan so much, and a lot of his amazing writing techniques were able to rub off on the main core of the group and just work in a beautiful manner. Just songs like Tears of Rage, To Kingdom Come, Long Black Veil, Chest Fever, and Lonesome Susie. To keep saying it, they're just brilliant. Robbie Robertson is on fire with the guitar. Rick Danko always has perfect bass for every song. The duo of Richard Manuel and Garth Hudson on keys is just immaculate. And lastly, the drum work. It's not always the first thing that I notice on any given record, but Levon Helm is just a master of the kit. His work is really what brings every song in the catalog to make this climax and really just showcase how brilliant of a band they are. The playing on this record to me is just perfect, and the songs themselves are just absolutely amazing. Vocals are in top form, and as I said earlier, everything about this record just culminates into a five-star masterpiece, and it is my favorite album of the 60s as a whole. But yeah, that's how I personally feel about the music of the band. If you feel differently, feel free to go ahead and tell me. If I had to place it anywhere, Moondog Matinee is probably, if I'm being brutally honest, my ninth. It's a fine enough covers record, but I just don't simply feel that it adds a ton to the discography and is a little lacking given the time period. But with that being said, I'm really glad that you stuck around. The next episode that we're going to be doing is I'm going to have a friend with me, Zach, and we're going to be ranking all of the James Bond theme songs for that film franchise. I think that that's going to be a ton of fun, and I really hope that everybody who watches enjoys. That being said, you all have a great one. Bye.